Hello, and welcome back to the Between Sleep and Science. Tonight, we will journey through the astonishing narrative of life on our planet. A story that spans billions of years, characterized by incredible shifts, profound adaptation, and perpetual awe. We're about to explore a saga where minuscule alterations compound over time, giving rise to magnificent biodiversity, where living entities ascend from primordial oceans to colonize every landmass. It is a chronicle of life's resilience, enduring massive cataclysms and flourishing in virtually every niche on Earth. The concept of evolution is simultaneously humbling and deeply inspirational, creating an unbreakable connection between every single living thing that has ever drawn breath. If these quiet wanderings bring you even a moment of calm, feel free to leave a few warm words, or tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, so we can see how far our explorations travel. You can also simply like and subscribe. Your support helps other weary hearts discover this cozy corner. And now, you don't need to do anything at all. Just settle in comfortably and let the slow, steady rhythm of deep time gently carry you away from your worries. Let the journey begin. The spark of life. Every organism alive today shares an ancient lineage, tracing back to a common progenitor that existed billions of years ago. When one observes the sheer variety of life, from immense redwood trees to unseen bacteria, from giant whales to miniature hummingbirds, it seems impossible that they could all share a familial bond. Nevertheless, every plant, animal, fungus, and microbe on our world traces its history back to one singular ancestor that lived approximately 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. Biologists refer to this theoretical organism as the last universal common ancestor, or LUCA. We have no definite knowledge of LUCA's appearance, but its existence is certain because all living things employ the same fundamental biochemistry. We all rely on deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, to maintain genetic instructions. We construct proteins using the exact same 20 amino acids. And we utilize a universal genetic code to translate DNA into those proteins. These consistent universal properties are like a profound signature etched into every cell, incontrovertible proof that all life on Earth forms one vast family tree, branching and diversifying across the eons, yet eternally linked at its foundation. Life first arose within the ancient waters of our young planet. Earth solidified about 4.6 billion years ago, initially a molten globe slowly shedding heat in the vacuum of space. For hundreds of millions of years, the surface was utterly hostile, constantly bombarded by celestial debris. But gradually, the planet stabilized. Vast oceans condensed from atmospheric water vapor and were supplemented by icy comets impacting the surface. Somewhere within these primal oceans, perhaps near geothermal vents, where hot, mineral-rich fluids spewed from the ocean floor, or maybe in shallow, sun-warmed tidal basins, non-living chemistry transitioned into biology. Simple organic molecules, the foundational components of life, began to spontaneously self-organize into more complex architectures. These pioneering molecules gained the ability to replicate themselves, establish protective outer membranes, and draw energy from their environment. The earliest forms of life were nothing like the robust organisms we see today. They were much simpler, more delicate, yet they possessed the essential capacity to reproduce and to evolve. That nascent spark of life, once ignited, would never be fully extinguished. Across immense periods of shifting continents, volcanic activity, and even asteroid impacts, life would tenaciously persist and ultimately flourish. The age of single cells. The first organisms were simple, single-celled entities lacking a nucleus. For the first 2 billion years of life's history, all organisms were unicellular and lacked the intricate internal compartmentalization of modern cells. These ancient microbes, known as prokaryotes, were essentially small sacs of chemical components encased in a membrane, with their DNA freely suspended inside. They comprised the domains of bacteria and archaea, the two most ancient branches on the tree of life. Despite their simplicity, they achieved incredible evolutionary success. They mastered the art of capturing energy from sunlight through photosynthesis. They learned to extract sustenance from gases and minerals. And they constructed immense communities, forming layered, rock-like structures called stromatolites, which can still be found in certain isolated locations today. These pioneering organisms radically transformed the planet. The oxygen they released as a byproduct of photosynthesis gradually accumulated in the atmosphere, slowly changing the sky from a hazy orange to the clear blue we now see. Without these humble, single-celled pioneers, the subsequent evolution of complex life would have been impossible. They established the fundamental conditions for everything that followed, and they continue to thrive today, their total numbers surpassing all other life forms combined. Complex internal cellular structures evolved when one cell engulfed another in a permanent alliance. Roughly 2 billion years ago, a monumental event occurred. A simple prokaryotic cell absorbed a smaller cell. Critically, instead of being consumed, the two formed a mutually beneficial partnership. The smaller cell, likely a bacterium specializing in energy production, survived within its host. In exchange for protection and a steady supply of nutrients, it supplied usable energy to the larger cell. Over countless millennia, this collaboration became absolute. The absorbed cell evolved into the mitochondria, the tiny energy generators present in almost every complex cell today. This moment, known as endosymbiosis, ranks as one of the most pivotal points in life's history. It gave rise to eukaryotes, cells that feature a true nucleus and complex, specialized internal organs. Subsequently, a second endosymbiotic event took place when early eukaryotes incorporated photosynthetic bacteria, which then became the chloroplasts found in all plant cells. This cooperation between once independent organisms demonstrates that evolution is not solely about competition. Mutualism and partnership have been equally vital in shaping the trajectory of life. The cells in your body right now contain the descendants of those ancient bacteria, laboring tirelessly to sustain your existence. The multicellular leap and the Cambrian era. Multicellular life gradually emerged from basic colonies of single cells. For the vast majority of Earth's history, life consisted of individual cells or simple, loose colonies. But approximately 600 million years ago, certain cells began to remain bonded after dividing, forming permanent multicelled structures. This transformative step occurred independently across several different evolutionary lineages. Initially, these multicellular organisms were rudimentary, merely aggregates of cooperating cells. However, cooperation offered immense advantages. Cells could begin to specialize, some concentrating on food acquisition, while others managed locomotion or reproduction. Over time, these colonies became more integrated and organized. true bodies began to form, featuring distinct organs and tissues. The first multicellular animals were soft-bodied, reminiscent of ancient jellyfish or primitive marine worms. They left few direct fossils, but their presence is confirmed by trace fossils, tracks, burrows, and impressions left in ancient seafloor sediments. These pioneering animals set the stage for one of the most sudden and intense periods in evolutionary history. The Cambrian explosion witnessed an unprecedented surge of animal diversity over a remarkably short span of geological time. Around 541 million years ago, the speed of evolution abruptly intensified. In what was perhaps a 20 to 25 million year burst, most of the major animal body plans we recognize today materialized in the fossil record. This period is known as the Cambrian explosion. Suddenly, the oceans were populated by creatures exhibiting hard shells, jointed limbs, complex optical organs, and segmented bodies. Creatures like trilobites scuttled across the seabed. Unique hunters, such as Anomalocaris, with grasping appendages and large compound eyes, prowled the waters. Other organisms, like Haikuella and Opabenia, possessed such peculiar anatomies that researchers initially struggled to determine their orientation. This rapid innovative surge may have been fueled by rising oceanic oxygen levels, which provided the energetic resources needed for complex body construction. Alternatively, it could have been driven by an evolutionary arms race, where predators and prey relentlessly spurred one another to develop new defenses and offensive tools. Regardless of the trigger, the Cambrian explosion permanently reshaped life on Earth, establishing the foundational body architectures that would endure for hundreds of millions of years. Many animals from the early Cambrian period had body plans radically different from anything surviving today. The Cambrian seas were a testing ground for countless creative forms. Hallucigenia, famously misidentified and reconstructed upside down by early researchers, had rows of spines and tentacles. Opabenia was distinctive for its 5 eyes and a flexible, long proboscis used to secure food. Wiwaxia resembled a small armored organism covered in scales and protective spines. These strange animals were not evolutionary failures. They were innovative biological experiments. Some of their descendants survived to form modern groups, while others vanished entirely. The Cambrian period demonstrates that evolution is not a straight path from simple to complex. It is a vast, branching network where numerous variations are attempted, and only the successful designs are preserved. The development of the first eyes occurred during this period, fundamentally altering animal interactions. Before the Cambrian, the world was largely without sight. Organisms relied on detecting chemicals and vibrations, but true vision was absent. Then, light-sensitive patches of cells gradually appeared. Initially, they were simple pigment patches that could merely distinguish light from darkness, assisting organisms with orientation. Even this rudimentary vision conferred a distinct survival advantage. Natural selection favored any improvement, and over millions of years, these patches deepened into cups, allowing light to be focused more precisely. Eventually, true image-forming eyes evolved, complete with internal lenses. The emergence of vision transformed the evolutionary landscape. Predators could now spot potential prey from a distance. Prey could identify approaching danger. This ignited a perpetual evolutionary arms race, driving the development of camouflage, speed, armor plating, and countless other defensive and offensive adaptations. Optical organs have evolved independently dozens of times across different lineages. From the compound eyes of insects to the camera-like eyes of vertebrates, each design is a viable solution to the problem of sight, meticulously refined by eons of trial and error. That vision exists at all is a spectacular testament to evolution's profound creative power. Life conquers. The land plants were the first to colonize the continents, before animals, transforming barren landscapes into green environments. For the first 3 billion years of life, the continental land masses were sterile, rocky expanses scorched by the sun. All life was confined to the oceans. But approximately 470 million years ago, plants began their ambitious move onto land. The first terrestrial pioneers were simple, resembling early mosses and liverworts. They lacked true roots, leaves or flowers, surviving as small green shoots tethered to moist soil near water sources. They faced immense obstacles. On land, water retention is difficult, and ultraviolet radiation is intense. But plants developed ingenious solutions. They evolved waxy external coatings to minimize water loss, root-like structures to secure themselves and absorb moisture, and eventually specialized vascular tissues to transport nutrients and water throughout their bodies. As plants spread across the continents, they fundamentally altered the globe. Their root systems fractured rocks, generating soil. They absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, helping to moderate the global climate. And they released life-sustaining oxygen, making the air more breathable. By about 350 million years ago, vast forest ecosystems covered the land, filled with giant ferns and early tree forms. These proliferating green carpets prepared the stage for animals to follow, offering shelter and abundant food in a world that had previously been lifeless. The first animals to successfully walk on land were likely arthropods, similar in structure to scorpions. The transition from aquatic to terrestrial existence was one of the most significant leaps in animal evolution. The initial groups to accomplish this feat were the arthropods, creatures characterized by hard exoskeletons and jointed legs. Fossil evidence suggests that scorpion-like animals were crawling on land by 430 million years ago, hunting the small invertebrates that had already established themselves near the shorelines. These terrestrial pioneers faced the same difficulties as plants: desiccation, strong solar radiation, and the intensified effect of gravity, which felt much stronger without water's buoyancy. Their rigid exoskeletons helped conserve moisture, and their segmented bodies and jointed limbs were well suited for walking. Later, other arthropods followed, millipedes consuming decaying vegetation and primitive insects taking to the air. The land gradually became populated, giving rise to unique ecosystems distinct from those in the oceans. These early terrestrial animals were small and simple, but they established the biological foundation for all land-dwelling animals that would follow, including the vertebrates that would eventually dominate the continents. Amphibians were the first vertebrates to transition from aquatic environments onto land. Approximately 365 million years ago, a group of lobe-finned fish inhabiting shallow, oxygen-depleted swamps faced an environmental challenge. Their watery homes frequently dried up or became too stagnant to sustain them. Some of these fish possessed both gills and primitive lungs, allowing them to breathe air. They also had strong, muscular, lobed fins capable of supporting their weight, enabling them to drag themselves across mudflats to reach new pools. Over millions of years, natural selection favored individuals better equipped to move across land. Their fins slowly transformed into limbs complete with toes and fingers. Their skeletal structure became stronger, better able to counteract the pull of gravity. These intermediary forms, neither fully fish nor fully amphibian, left behind fossils like Tiktaalik, a creature with the body and the head structure of a crocodile, but the fin composition of a fish. Eventually, true amphibians emerged, capable of living on land, yet still tied to water for the reproductive phase of their life cycle. They were the first vertebrates to experience the sounds of the terrestrial world, to feel the sun directly on their skin, and to explore a world previously inaccessible to their ancestors. Early terrestrial vertebrates often had more than 5 digits on their limbs, before evolution settled on 5 as the optimal number. When the first vertebrates began crawling onto land, their limb structure was still in an experimental phase. Fossils of early tetrapods show species with 8, 7, or 6 digits per limb. No single standardized body plan had yet been established. However, over time, natural selection converged on 5 as the most advantageous number. 5 digits offered an effective balance between functionality and efficiency, providing ample flexibility and gripping ability without the high metabolic cost of maintaining superfluous digits. Once this 5-digit pattern was established in the common ancestor of modern terrestrial vertebrates, it became fixed. Today, nearly all land vertebrates, from frogs to birds to us, possess limbs based on this ancient pentadactyl plan, even if some digits have been reduced or lost. A horse's hoof, for example, is a single, immensely enlarged digit, with the other 4 reduced to vestigial remnants. A bat's wing is a hand with dramatically elongated fingers. Our own hands and feet follow the exact same ancient blueprint. It is a profound reminder that evolution builds by modifying existing structures rather than fabricating entirely new ones from the ground up. The reign of the giant reptiles evolved the amniotic egg, liberating them from dependence on aquatic reproduction. Amphibians successfully adapted to land, but they faced one critical constraint. They had to return to the water to reproduce. Their vulnerable offspring developed in streams and ponds, constantly threatened by drought and predation. However, approximately 320 million years ago, a group of amphibians developed a revolutionary innovation: the amniotic egg. This egg featured a protective, hard or leathery outer shell that prevented desiccation, and it contained all the necessities for embryonic development: a food source, a waste management system, and specialized membranes to cushion the embryo and enable gas exchange. With this pivotal invention, vertebrates were finally free of the water. They could lay their eggs in terrestrial environments, from dry forests to mountains. This adaptation led to the diversification of the reptiles, a highly successful group that would soon dominate the planet. Reptiles rapidly spread, evolving into an incredible array of forms. Some became rapid hunters, others developed defensive armor, and still others returned to the air or the sea. The amniotic egg stands as one of evolution's most crucial inventions, the key that unlocked the continents and permitted vertebrates to thrive in almost every terrestrial niche. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for an incredible period exceeding 160 million years. Around 230 million years ago, a new lineage of reptiles, the dinosaurs made their first appearance. Initially, they were small and overshadowed by other reptiles. But following a major global extinction event that eliminated many competing species, the dinosaurs rose to prominence. For the subsequent 160 million years, they were the unrivaled rulers of the land. They evolved into an astonishing diversity of shapes and sizes. There were colossal sauropods, like Brachiosaurus, whose long necks allowed them to graze on the tallest foliage. Armored giants, like Ankylosaurus, were protected by bony plates and powerful club-like tails. There were swift, agile predators like Velociraptor and immense hunters like Tyrannosaurus rex. Some dinosaurs possessed feathers, the direct ancestors of modern birds. Others sported elaborate horns and crests used for display. Dinosaurs were not the slow, dim-witted creatures often depicted. Many were active, intelligent, and lived in complex social groups, caring for their young and communicating through sound and visual signals. Their success was unparalleled. In comparison, modern Homo sapiens have existed for only about 300,000 years. Dinosaurs flourished for more than 500 times longer, a profound testament to their adaptability and evolutionary mastery. Some dinosaurs were feathered, and birds are their direct modern descendants. For decades, dinosaurs were uniformly imagined as scaly, lizard-like creatures. But starting in the 1990s, paleontologists made spectacular discoveries. Numerous dinosaurs had feathers. Initially, the evidence came from small theropods in Asia, with fossils so perfectly preserved that feather impressions were clearly visible in the rock. Subsequent finds confirmed that feathers were common among the dinosaur group that includes modern birds. Feathers likely first evolved for simple insulation, helping small dinosaurs maintain body temperature. Later, they were repurposed for display, featuring bright patterns and colors to attract mates or deter rivals. Eventually, within one lineage of small, agile dinosaurs, feathers became sufficiently rigid and large to enable powered flight. These creatures were the progenitors of all birds. Birds did not merely evolve from dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs, the single lineage that survived the mass extinctions 66 million years ago. When you watch a raptor or a robin, you are observing a living dinosaur, a direct relative of the creatures that once walked alongside Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. Evolution did not pause with the demise of the dinosaurs. It continues in every bird's morning song. The largest creatures ever to walk on land were the sauropod dinosaurs. Imagine an animal so enormous that the ground trembled with its every movement. Sauropods such as Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan were the largest terrestrial animals to ever exist, with some estimates placing their weight at over 70 tons, the equivalent mass of a dozen African elephants. They attained this immense scale through several key adaptations. Their bones were laced with air sacs, which reduced overall weight while maintaining structural strength. They possessed highly efficient respiratory systems, similar to those of modern birds, providing ample oxygen to fuel their colossal bodies. Their incredibly long necks enabled them to access vegetation unreachable by other herbivores, guaranteeing an endless food supply. But such size brought unique challenges. Their metabolism generated massive amounts of heat, necessitating careful body temperature regulation. Their sheer bulk meant that agility was impossible. Yet, their size also provided ultimate protection. Few predators could threaten a fully mature sauropod. These magnificent, gentle giants wandered in herds across ancient landscapes, dramatically shaping the ecosystems they traversed, creating pathways through forests, and leaving rich fertilizer that sustained the soil. They represent the extreme limits of evolution's capacity to engineer massive terrestrial forms. The Great Extinction's life has endured 5 major mass extinction events throughout its history. Earth's deep history is marked by profound, catastrophic periods where the vast majority of species vanished in geologically short periods of time. Scientists currently recognize 5 major mass extinction events. The first, near the end of the Ordovician period, 445 million years ago, wiped out an estimated 85% of species, likely due to rapid climate change. The late Devonian extinction, 375 million years ago, devastated marine life. The Permian Triassic extinction, 252 million years ago, was the most severe of all, eliminating an estimated 96% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. It is grimly known as the Great Dying. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction 201 million years ago cleared the path for the dinosaurs to become dominant. And the most renowned, the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction 66 million years ago, brought the dinosaur era to a dramatic close. Each extinction radically reshaped the planet, removing the established dominant groups and creating space for new ones to rise. Mass extinctions are tragic losses, erasing millions of years of evolutionary novelty. But they are also opportunities. In their wake, surviving species rapidly diversify, eagerly filling the vacated ecological niches. Without these mass extinction events, the history of life would look radically different. Modern humans might never have evolved at all. The Permian extinction killed more than 90% of all species on Earth. The worst biological catastrophe in the planet's history occurred 252 million years ago. In a period of perhaps only 60,000 years, a flash in geological time, over 90% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared. The oceans became nearly sterile. Forests were decimated. The planet resembled a devastated wasteland. What triggered this level of devastation? Evidence strongly suggests vast volcanic eruptions in a colossal northern volcanic region of the Eurasian landmass, which blanketed an area the size of Europe with lava. These eruptions released massive volumes of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing extreme global warming, ocean acidification, and widespread acid rain. Oxygen levels in the oceans plummeted, asphyxiating most marine life. On land, temperatures soared, and entire ecosystems collapsed. Life came terrifyingly close to total annihilation. Recovery took many millions of years. New species slowly evolved to occupy their empty niches, but the world was fundamentally changed. Groups that had ruled the Permian period vanished forever, replaced by new forms. This extinction serves as a stark reminder of life's fragility and how quickly eons of evolution can be reversed by catastrophic environmental shifts. The asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs left a crater 180 kilometers wide. 66 million years ago, the dominion of the non-avian dinosaurs ceased in a single devastating day. A massive asteroid, estimated to be about 10 kilometers across, struck Earth near the Central American landmass, specifically near a prominent coastal bay. The impact unleashed energy equivalent to billions of nuclear warheads. It instantly vaporized the asteroid and a huge volume of underlying rock, gouging a crater 20 kilometers deep and 180 kilometers wide. The immediate consequences were terrifying. a superheated firestorm expanded outward, igniting global forest fires. A colossal tsunami swept across the oceans. But the lasting effects were far worse. The impact blasted trillions of tons of dust and debris into the atmosphere, which blocked sunlight for months, perhaps years. Global temperatures plummeted, photosynthesis halted, plants died, followed by the herbivores that depended on them, and then the carnivores. The entire food web collapsed. Approximately 75% of all species were lost, including all non-avian dinosaurs. Only small, adaptable creatures survived. Mammals sheltered in burrows, birds that could migrate, and reptiles able to subsist on limited resources. The world that emerged from this cataclysm was sparse and open for new life forms to inherit. Small mammals survived the extinction by finding shelter underground. When the asteroid struck, almost all large animals perished. But the small mammals, generally no larger than modern shrews or rats, survived by taking refuge in caves and underground burrows, protected from the immediate devastation. They were capable of surviving on seeds, insects, and roots, foods that remained available even after the larger ecosystems failed. These inconspicuous survivors were the ancestors of every modern mammal, including humankind. In the wake of the extinction, with the giant reptiles gone, mammals began their great diversification. They emerged from the shadows and began to increase in size, filling the ecological roles previously held by the dinosaurs. Within 10 million years, mammals had evolved into a stunning variety of forms: carnivores, herbivores, tree dwellers, burrowers, and aquatic swimmers. They developed advanced brains and complex social behaviors, and eventually, in some lineages, remarkable intelligence. The extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs was a tragedy, but it was also a profound opportunity. Without it, mammals might have remained small and secretive, perpetually overshadowed by the reptilian giants. The asteroid that concluded one great era simultaneously inaugurated another, setting the stage for the eventual emergence of primates and humans. The rise of mammals evolved from reptilian ancestors over 200 million years ago. Long before the dinosaurs reigned, a group of reptiles known as synapsids roamed the globe. These creatures already possessed some proto-mammalian characteristics: differentiated teeth, a more upright posture, and perhaps even early whiskers and fur. Over tens of millions of years, they progressively became more mammalian. They developed a more efficient metabolism, enabling them to sustain a constant internal body temperature. They evolved highly specialized teeth for tearing, grinding, and cutting food. They also developed a secondary palate, allowing them to breathe continuously while chewing. They invested more attentiveness in caring for their young than most other reptiles. By roughly 200 million years ago, true mammals had appeared. They were small, predominantly nocturnal creatures living beneath the shadow of the dinosaurs. For over 100 million years, they remained tiny, but they were incrementally perfecting the adaptations that would later prove decisive: warm-bloodedness, fur for insulation, acute senses, and a brain notably large relative to their body size. When the dinosaurs vanished, the mammals were perfectly positioned to inherit the Earth. Their eventual success demonstrates that evolution often proceeds slowly, accumulating minor advantages over vast stretches of time, waiting for the critical moment when those advantages become overwhelmingly decisive. Early mammals were small and primarily nocturnal, which helped them avoid dinosaur predators. During the age of the dinosaurs, mammals occupied a subordinate position. Most were no larger than a modern mouse or shrew. They sought refuge in rock crevices, burrows, and hollow trees, emerging primarily under the cover of night to forage. This nocturnal lifestyle was an essential survival tactic. By being active when the gigantic reptiles were typically resting, mammals significantly reduced their risk of predation. This lifestyle also heavily influenced their evolution. Operating in the darkness meant mammals came to rely heavily on smell and hearing rather than sight. Many developed exceptional night vision or the ability to echolocate. Their whiskers evolved into highly sensitive tactile organs. Their brains grew larger to process this complex sensory information. These adaptations, honed by the necessity of nocturnal life, later proved highly beneficial when mammals diversified into niches during the day. Our own ancestors were among these small nocturnal foragers, darting through the underbrush while dinosaurs ruled the canopy. The large brains and keen senses we inherited can be traced directly back to this humble, survival-driven existence. Mammals are fundamentally defined by specialized teeth, fur, and mammary glands. What is the definitive criterion for being classified as a mammal? All members of the class Mammalia share several distinguishing features. They possess hair or fur at some point in their lifespan, which provides essential insulation. They produce milk to nourish their young, secreted by specialized mammary glands. They have 3 unique middle ear bones that significantly amplify sound, granting them superior hearing. Crucially, they have differentiated teeth specialized for different functions: incisors for cutting, canines for tearing, and molars for grinding. Most mammals give birth to live young, though a few, such as the platypus and the echidna, still lay eggs, serving as a reminder of their reptilian ancestry. Mammals are also endothermic, or warm-blooded, meaning they maintain a constant internal temperature irrespective of the external environment. This allows them to be active across a wide range of climates, but demands a constant, steady supply of food to fuel their high metabolism. These shared characteristics are the product of a common evolutionary lineage. Every mammal, from the smallest shrew to the largest whale, bears these biological signatures of mammalian history. We are all part of the same grand lineage, modified in countless ways over millions of years of adaptation to diverse environments. Whales evolved from land-dwelling mammals that eventually returned to the sea. One of evolution's most remarkable transformations is the emergence of whales. These enormous marine mammals are descended from small, hoofed terrestrial animals similar to modern deer. Approximately 50 million years ago, some of these creatures began to spend more time in the water, possibly hunting fish in coastal shallows and rivers. Over millions of years, natural selection favored traits that enhanced their aquatic capabilities. Their legs shortened and became more paddle-like. Their tails broadened into flukes for propulsion. Their nostrils migrated to the top of their heads, becoming blowholes. Their bodies developed a highly streamlined shape. Eventually, their hind limbs disappeared entirely, though residual, non-functional leg bones still exist deep within their bodies. Transitional fossils beautifully chronicle this entire transformation. Pachycetus, an early ancestor, was a wolf-sized animal capable of walking on land and swimming. Ambulocetus possessed webbed feet and hunted in shallow waters. Dorudon was almost completely aquatic, retaining only tiny vestigial hind limbs. Modern whales are so thoroughly adapted to the sea that they cannot survive on land. Yet their DNA, their embryonic development, and their skeletons all provide evidence of their ancient terrestrial origins, a spectacular example of evolution's capacity to dramatically reshape body plans over time. Some mammals evolved the ability to fly, becoming bats with membranous wings. Around 50 million years ago, a group of small mammals took to the skies. They were the ancestors of bats, the only mammals capable of sustained powered flight. How did this transition occur? These early creatures likely lived in trees, making leaps between branches. Natural selection favored individuals with extra skin between their limbs, which functioned like a parachute, enabling controlled longer glides. Over time, their fingers elongated dramatically, and the skin stretching between them grew larger and more flexible, forming true wings. Their bones became significantly lighter and their chest muscles stronger. They developed the capacity for echolocation, emitting high-pitched sounds and interpreting the echoes, allowing them to navigate and hunt with precision in total darkness. Today, bats are incredibly diverse, with over 1,400 species. Some consume insects, others feed on fruit, nectar, or even blood. They fulfill crucial ecological roles, pollinating plants, dispersing seeds, and controlling insect populations. Bats demonstrate that evolution can take a standard mammalian body plan and transform it into something extraordinary, creating abilities that seem almost miraculous, yet arise through gradual step-by-step modification. Primate evolution. Primates evolved hands and feet uniquely adapted for gripping tree branches. Our own evolutionary saga begins with small arboreal creatures called primates, which emerged about 65 million years ago, immediately following the demise of the dinosaurs. These mammals adapted to life high in the forest canopy. Living among the branches required exceptional balance, coordination, and the ability to grasp firmly. Natural selection favored hands and feet with flexible, opposable fingers and toes instead of fixed claws. These prehensile appendages allowed primates to securely grip branches, manipulate objects, and efficiently gather food. Primates also developed superior depth perception. Their eyes shifted to the front of the head, providing overlapping fields of vision that enabled them to accurately judge distances, a critical skill for leaping between branches. They evolved larger brains to process this complex visual and motor information. Early primates were small, resembling modern tarsiers or lemurs. They consumed insects, leaves, and fruit. From these modest beginnings, the primate lineage branched out, eventually leading to monkeys, apes, and humans. Every time you grip a tool, climb a ladder, or accurately assess a target's distance, you are utilizing traits inherited from these early, tree-dwelling ancestors. Forward-facing eyes provided primates with excellent depth perception, essential for arboreal life. One of the most defining characteristics of primates is their forward-facing eyes. Unlike the majority of mammals, whose eyes are positioned on the sides of the head to provide a wide view, primates' eyes face forward. This arrangement causes the visual fields from both eyes to overlap significantly, resulting in stereoscopic, three-dimensional vision. The brain combines the two slightly disparate images to accurately perceive depth. This adaptation was vital for navigating life high in the trees, where misjudging the distance to a branch could result in a fatal fall. With this superior depth perception, primates could leap confidently, knowing precisely where they would land. They could grasp fruit or snatch flying insects with accuracy. This reliance on vision fundamentally shaped primate evolution. Primates became intensely visual creatures, dedicating large portions of their brains to processing visual data. Color vision also evolved, assisting them in identifying ripe fruits and tender leaves. These visual skills, developed for navigating the forest canopy, later proved critical for tool use, social signaling, and the complex cognitive tasks that characterize our species. Our closest living relatives are bonobos and chimpanzees, sharing approximately 98% of our DNA. It is important to note that humans did not evolve directly from modern apes. Instead, we share a common ancestor with them. Our nearest living relatives are the bonobos and chimpanzees, two species of African great apes. Genetic studies confirm that we share between 98 and 99% of our DNA with these species. This indicates that about 6 to 7 million years ago, a single ancestral species diverged into two distinct lineages, one that led to modern bonobos and chimpanzees, and the other that led to humans. This profound closeness is evident not only in genetics, but also in their anatomy, behavior, and cognitive abilities. Like us, chimpanzees are known to use tools, solve complex problems, and live in sophisticated social groups. They exhibit a wide range of emotions, form alliances, and engage in both social politics and territorial conflict. Bonobos, in contrast, are often more peaceful, relying on social bonding to resolve disputes. Studying these related species helps us discern which traits are uniquely human and which were inherited from our shared ancient ancestors. It serves as a powerful reminder that we are not separate from the natural world, but merely one branch on its vast and interconnected tree. Humans belong to a group called hominins, which includes all apes capable of walking upright. After the evolutionary divergence from the chimpanzee lineage, a new group emerged, the hominins. These were apes distinguished by bipedalism, the ability to walk habitually on two legs. Over the next several million years, multiple hominin species evolved across the African continent. Some, like Australopithecus, were small and still spent time in the trees. Others, like Paranthropus, had extremely large jaws adapted for chewing tough vegetation. Many of these distinct species coexisted, sharing the same landscapes at certain times. In some historical moments, 3 or 4 different hominin species lived concurrently. Most eventually became extinct, leaving no descendants. However, one lineage persisted and evolved into the genus Homo, which includes modern humans. Bipedalism was the defining adaptation of hominins. Walking upright freed the hands for carrying provisions, using simple tools, and interacting with the environment. It enabled hominins to see over tall grasses and traverse long distances with greater energy efficiency. It also changed the shape of the spine, pelvis, and skull. Bipedalism was not a sudden change, but a gradual process, with transitional fossils showing intermediate forms. It set hominins onto the path that would eventually lead to our species. Walking upright freed the hands, which was a prerequisite for later complex manipulation and tool use. Why did hominins adopt bipedalism? Multiple theories have been proposed. Perhaps walking on 2 legs was more energetically efficient for covering long distances across the changing African savanna. Perhaps it helped regulate body temperature by reducing the surface area of skin exposed directly to the sun. Or perhaps it allowed early hominins to carry provisions and objects back to a home base. Whatever the initial benefit, bipedalism had profound evolutionary consequences. With their hands no longer required for locomotion, hominins could transport food, weapons, and early tools. This capacity led to greater resource gathering and transportation efficiency. Eventually, they began to manufacture tools. Initially, these were simple stone flakes for butchering, later evolving into more complex implements. Tool use and bipedalism mutually reinforced each other. As tools became more important, natural selection favored individuals whose hands were better suited for precise manipulation. Fingers became more dexterous, and thumbs became more opposable. Brain size increased to coordinate intricate hand movements and plan tool-making strategies. Bipedalism, starting as merely an altered way of walking, initiated a cascade of evolutionary changes that transformed hominins into something unique: human. Human origins. The earliest evidence of stone tools dates back approximately 3.3 million years. For most of our deep evolutionary history, hominins did not manufacture tools. They simply utilized sticks and stones found in nature, much like some modern apes. But about 3.3 million years ago, a change occurred. In a specific region of East Africa, archaeologists unearthed the oldest known stone tools, rocks deliberately shaped by striking one against another to create sharp, functional edges. These simple tools, consisting of basic cores and flakes, were revolutionary. They allowed hominins to butcher animal carcasses, granting access to calorie-rich meat and marrow that would otherwise have been inaccessible. Meat provided concentrated calories and nutrients, fueling the growth of larger brains. Tool use also demanded foresight, planning, and fine motor control. Over time, tools became increasingly sophisticated. Different tool types were developed for different purposes: hand axes, scrapers, and spear points. Tool-making became a learned cultural skill, transmitted through imitation and teaching, not genetics. The invention of these stone tools marked a definitive turning point in hominin evolution, setting us on an accelerating path of reliance on technology, a path we continue to follow today. The genus Homo first emerged in Africa around 2.8 million years ago. Approximately 2.8 million years ago, a new kind of hominin appeared in the fossil record. This was the genus Homo, characterized by markedly larger brains, smaller teeth, and more sophisticated tool use compared to earlier hominins. The first recognized species, Homo habilis, or handyman, possessed a brain roughly half the size of a modern human's, but was clever enough to create simple stone tools. These early humans were still relatively small, standing around 4 feet tall. They lived across various African environments, from open savannas to woodlands. They likely scavenged meat from the kills of large predators and gathered plant foods. Over the next 2 million years, numerous Homo species evolved. Homo erectus stood fully upright, had a brain 2/3 the size of ours, and was the first hominin to migrate out of Africa, spreading across the vast eastern territories and possibly reaching Europe. Homo heidelbergensis may have been the common ancestor of both modern humans and Neanderthals. Each species represented a distinct evolutionary experiment in being human, finding different solutions to the fundamental challenges of survival. Most eventually went extinct, but they all remain vital branches on the human family tree. The size of the human brain tripled dramatically over the course of human evolution. One of the most striking trends in our evolution is the immense increase in brain volume. Early hominins, like Australopithecus, had brain capacities of about 400 to 500 cubic centimeters, comparable to modern chimpanzees. By the time Homo habilis appeared, the volume had grown to about 600 cubic centimeters. Homo erectus reached around 900 cubic centimeters. Neanderthals and modern humans boast average brain volumes of 300 to 400 cubic centimeters. In just a few million years, our brains effectively tripled in size. Why did this happen? Larger brains conferred substantial cognitive advantages, improved problem-solving skills, more complex tool use, enhanced social capabilities, and the capacity for future planning. However, large brains are metabolically expensive. They consume about 20% of our energy intake while only making up 2% of body weight. They also create challenges during childbirth. The benefits must have been sufficiently high to outweigh these considerable costs. Natural selection favored intelligence, and once this trend began, it became self-reinforcing. Smarter individuals secured more food, created better tools, and produced more offspring, passing on the genetic blueprint for larger brains. Homo erectus was the first hominin to harness fire and migrate beyond Africa. Homo erectus was a pivotal species in human evolution. Appearing around 1.9 million years ago, they were the first hominins to possess a truly human-like appearance, with long legs, short arms, and a physique optimized for long-distance running and walking. They created more sophisticated tools than their ancestors, including symmetrical hand axes that demanded significant foresight and skill to manufacture. Most significantly, Homo erectus was the first hominin to gain control over fire. Evidence of controlled fire use dates back at least 1 million years, possibly earlier. Fire provided light after dark, warmth, protection from large predators, and the ability to cook food. Cooking made food safer and easier to digest, yielding more calories and nutrients to fuel their growing brains. Homo erectus was also the first hominin to venture outside of Africa. Their fossils have been discovered across the vast eastern territories and the western Eurasian land bridge. They adapted to a wide range of environments, from tropical forests to temperate grasslands. Some populations of Homo erectus persisted until about 100,000 years ago, overlapping with the emergence of modern humans. They were an adaptable, intelligent, and highly successful species, representing a major step toward modern humanity. Neanderthals were intelligent, culturally advanced humans who lived across Europe and Asia. Neanderthals often suffer from a poor reputation, frequently portrayed as primitive and brutish. The evidence, however, reveals a different picture. They were a distinct species of human, Homo neanderthalensis, that evolved across Europe and Western Asia between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago. They possessed stocky, muscular bodies, which were adaptations to the intensely cold Ice Age climates they inhabited. They were far from primitive. Neanderthals had brains as large as, or in some cases larger than, modern humans. They manufactured sophisticated stone tools, including composite tools with attached wooden handles. They controlled fire, built sturdy shelters, and wore clothing made from animal hides. They cared for their sick and elderly, as evidenced by fossils of individuals who survived severe injuries that would have been fatal without assistance. They buried their dead, sometimes with flowers or grave goods, suggesting symbolic thought and perhaps a concept of the afterlife. They may also have created art, using pigments to decorate cave walls and shells. Recent genetic analyses confirm that Neanderthals interbred with Homo sapiens when the two species encountered each other in the Middle East and Europe. Today, people of non-African descent carry roughly 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. They were not an evolutionary failure. They were our highly successful, intelligent and adaptable cousins who made a lasting contribution to our genetic heritage. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa approximately 300,000 years ago. Our species, Homo sapiens, originated in Africa around 300,000 years ago. The oldest, reliably identified fossils belonging to our species originate from Morocco and are dated to about 315,000 years ago. These early Homo sapiens differed slightly from people today, possessing longer, flatter skulls, but they were unmistakably human. For over 200,000 years, Homo sapiens remained within Africa, living in small bands, gathering and hunting, and incrementally developing more complex tools and behaviors. Then, around 70,000 years ago, a shift occurred. Human populations began a rapid expansion. They developed new technologies, finely crafted stone blades, bone tools, and sewing needles for making intricate clothing. They created art, carving figurines, and painting spectacular images on cave walls. They produced jewelry from beads and shells. This flourishing of culture and technology is sometimes referred to as the Great Leap Forward. Humans began migrating out of Africa in successive waves, eventually spreading across the entire globe. By 15,000 years ago, our species had reached every continent except Antarctica. What accounts for the unparalleled success of Homo sapiens? Perhaps it was our unique capacity for language, complex social cooperation, and symbolic thought. Whatever the reason, we became the last remaining hominin species. Humans populated every continent through a series of significant global migrations. The story of how our species populated the world is one defined by astonishing adaptability, courage, and endless movement. The first modern humans to exit Africa crossed into the Western Eurasian land bridge around 120,000 years ago, though this early migration was unsuccessful in establishing a permanent presence. A second, more lasting wave of migration occurred around 70,000 years ago. From the Western Eurasian land bridge, humans spread outward in multiple directions. Some moved east across southern Asia, reaching Australia by about 65,000 years ago, a journey that required the construction of seaworthy craft and navigation of open water. Others moved north into Europe, where they encountered and eventually replaced Neanderthals. Still others pressed into Central Asia and eventually into the immense Northern Asian plateau, around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. During a period of lower sea levels, humans crossed from the Northern Asian plateau into North America via the ancient intercontinental land bridge. From there, they spread rapidly southward through the Americas, reaching the southern tip of South America within just a few thousand years. Each wave of migration necessitated adaptation to entirely new climates, environments, and food sources. Humans proved exceptionally flexible, developing specialized clothing, survival strategies, and tools for deserts, mountains, temperate forests, and frozen tundra. Today, we are a truly global species, present in nearly every terrestrial environment on Earth. Different human populations evolved distinct physical characteristics in response to their local environments. As humans dispersed across the globe, they encountered radically different environments. Natural selection acted upon these populations in various ways, leading to the evolution of specific physical traits. In areas with intense sunlight, such as equatorial Africa, dark skin evolved to protect against ultraviolet radiation, which can damage DNA and cause cancers. Conversely, in northern latitudes, where sunlight is less intense, lighter skin evolved to facilitate the efficient synthesis of vitamin D, which requires UV light. Body proportions also adapted. Populations living in very hot climates tend to have slender, elongated limbs that aid in heat dissipation. Those in frigid climates tend toward shorter, stockier builds that help conserve body heat. At high altitudes, populations evolved genetic adaptations to cope with low oxygen levels. For instance, peoples residing in extreme high-altitude regions have genetic changes that enhance oxygen delivery to their tissues. These variations are superficial, affecting appearance but not core biology. All humans belong to the single species, Homo sapiens, and are fully capable of interbreeding. Genetic diversity between any two human populations is minute compared to the variation within populations. The concept of race, as traditionally understood, has no definitive biological basis. We are one species, recently separated by geography, exhibiting minor adaptations to local ecological pressures. Language likely evolved between 50,000 and 200,000 years ago. One of the most defining human characteristics is language, our unique ability to communicate using complex symbolic systems. But when precisely did language evolve? We cannot know with certainty, as language leaves no direct fossil evidence. However, educated estimates can be made based on anatomy and archaeology. The structure of the skull, the position of the larynx, and the size of the hypoglossal canal, which carries nerves to the tongue, all influence speech capability. Fossil evidence suggests that Homo heidelbergensis, living around 500,000 years ago, may have possessed some capacity for speech. Modern humans possess a gene called FOXP2. Mutations in this gene cause severe language impairment. Neanderthals shared the same version of this gene, implying they too may have had language. Archaeological evidence for complex culture, long-distance trade, and intricate art, all activities requiring advanced communication, appears strongly by about 50,000 years ago. Language dramatically transformed human evolution. It enabled the detailed transmission of knowledge across generations. It allowed for complex cooperation on a scale impossible for other animals. It unlocked abstract thought, planning, and storytelling. Language is what made us uniquely human, capable of accumulating culture and building upon the achievements of previous generations. Mechanisms of change. Natural selection is the process by which traits that offer an advantage become more prevalent. Evolution is driven by several interlocking mechanisms, but the most fundamental is natural selection. The principle is elegantly simple, yet profoundly powerful. Within any given population, individuals exhibit a variety of traits. Some of these traits are heritable, passed from parent to offspring through genes. In any specific environment, some traits provide a greater benefit for survival and reproduction than others. Individuals possessing advantageous traits are more likely to survive mate and transmit those traits to the next generation. Over time, beneficial traits become common, while disadvantageous traits become rare. This cyclical process, repeated over countless generations, results in adaptation, the precise match between an organism and its environment. Natural selection is not a conscious entity. It has no forethought or objective. It is simply the unavoidable consequence of heritable variation and differential reproductive success. This concept, first recognized by Charles Darwin in the 19th century, remains the absolute cornerstone of evolutionary biology. Natural selection accounts for life's incredible diversity, from the perfect camouflage of an insect to the advanced intelligence of a dolphin. It is nature's editing mechanism, preserving what works and discarding what doesn't. Mutations are random alterations in DNA that provide the essential raw material for evolution. Where does the initial variation come from? The ultimate source is mutation, random changes that occur within DNA sequences. Mutations happen when DNA is copied inaccurately during cell division, or when it is damaged by environmental factors like chemicals or radiation. The vast majority of mutations have no discernible effect, often occurring in non-coding sections of the genome. Some are detrimental, disrupting vital genes and reducing survival potential. But a small minority are beneficial, granting new capabilities or improving existing ones. These rare beneficial mutations are the lifeblood of evolution. Without mutation, there would be no variation, and without variation, natural selection would have nothing to act upon. Mutations occur constantly at a slow, measurable rate. For instance, each human is born with approximately 60 new mutations not present in their parents. Most are harmless, but over millions of years, these minor alterations accumulate, creating the vast diversity we observe in nature. The differences between species and the variation within them. While mutation is random, evolution is not. Natural selection systematically sorts through these random mutations, eliminating the harmful ones and preserving those that offer an advantage. Genetic drift causes evolutionary change purely through random chance in small populations. Not all evolution is adaptive or driven by advantage. Sometimes populations change simply due to arbitrary, random events, a process called genetic drift. In populations with small numbers, chance occurrences can have disproportionately large effects. Imagine a tiny population of 20 beetles evenly split between green and brown. If a falling object accidentally eliminates 5 green beetles, the new ratio is 10 brown to 5 green. This change occurred not because brown was inherently better, but simply by accident. Over successive generations, random births and deaths can cause certain traits to become fixed or to disappear entirely, even if they offer no benefit. Genetic drift is especially influential in very small populations, such as those that have recently colonized a new area or are endangered. It can lead to a loss of genetic diversity, making those populations more susceptible to disease or sudden environmental changes. Genetic drift is also the reason why some neutral traits, like certain variations in blood type, differ randomly between populations. Evolution is not solely about survival of the fittest. Chance plays a significant role, reminding us that history is contingent, shaped by accident as much as by necessity. Gene flow occurs when individuals migrate between populations, mixing their genetic information. populations of the same species are rarely completely isolated. Individuals frequently move from one population to another, carrying their genes with them. This movement, known as gene flow or migration, actively mixes the genetic makeup of different groups. Gene flow can introduce novel traits, thereby increasing genetic diversity. It can also cause populations to become more similar, counteracting the effects of genetic drift and natural selection that would otherwise cause them to diverge. In the human history, gene flow has been continuous. As people traveled, traded, and intermarried, they constantly exchanged genes. This explains why humans exhibit clinal variation, gradual changes in traits across geography, rather than abrupt divisions. Gene flow also contributes to why humans possess such relatively low genetic diversity compared to many other species. We are a young species that rapidly spread globally, with continuous mixing occurring between populations. Gene flow is a homogenizing force, effectively working against speciation. However, when populations are isolated geographically or behaviorally, gene flow ceases, and the populations are then free to diverge, eventually becoming distinct species. Sexual selection drives the evolution of traits that boost mating success, often at the expense of survival. Charles Darwin identified a second powerful form of selection that operates not through mere survival, but through reproduction. Sexual selection favors traits that improve an individual's ability to successfully attract a mate and reproduce. Sometimes these traits are actually detrimental to survival, but are maintained because they drastically increase reproductive output. The most famous example is the male peacock's tail. It is conspicuous, immense, and brightly colored, making the bird far more visible to predators. However, peahens strongly prefer males with the largest, most elaborate tails. These impressive males mate more frequently and produce more offspring, passing on the genetic instructions for showy tails. Over generations, the tails become ever more elaborate. Sexual selection can manifest in two ways. Intersexual selection involves one sex, usually the female, choosing mates based on specific characteristics. Intrasexual selection involves members of one sex, usually males, competing physically or visually with each other for access to mates. The large antlers of elk, the dense manes of male lions, and the complex songs of many bird species are all products of sexual selection. In humans, sexual selection may have played a role in shaping traits like facial symmetry, smooth skin, and perhaps even intelligence and creativity. Co-evolution takes place when two species evolve in direct response to one another. Evolution rarely happens in isolation. Species frequently interact, and these interactions can spur reciprocal evolutionary changes. This is co-evolution. A classic illustration is the relationship between flowering plants and the organisms that pollinate them. Plants evolved distinctive scents, vivid colors, and sweet nectar to attract insects, bats, and birds. In turn, pollinators evolved specific traits that help them access the flowers. Specialized beaks in hummingbirds, long tongues in moths, and acute color vision in bees. Each species molds the evolution of the other. Predator-prey relationships are another common example of co-evolution. As prey species develop better defenses, predators simultaneously evolve better offensive strategies, leading to a perpetual evolutionary arms race. For instance, the toxins produced by poison dart frogs evolved in response to predators, and some predators have, in turn, evolved resistance to those toxins. Hosts and parasites are also in a continuous state of coevolution. Hosts develop immune defenses, and parasites evolve new ways to evade them. Co-evolution creates incredibly complex, interdependent webs of interaction. It is a major reason why ecosystems are so interconnected and intricate. No species evolves alone. We all evolve together, shaped by and shaping the other species that surround us. Convergent evolution produces similar traits in unrelated species facing identical challenges. Sometimes, the evolutionary process repeats itself. Different evolutionary lineages, when exposed to similar environmental pressures, independently develop similar solutions. This phenomenon is termed convergent evolution. The most well-known example is flight. The ability to fly evolved independently in insects, extinct pterosaurs, birds, and bats. All used different biological starting materials, but arrived at the same solution: wings. Another example is the sleek, torpedo-like body shape of dolphins, sharks, and extinct ichthyosaurs. These animals are not closely related. One is a mammal, one a fish, and one an ancient reptile, but all evolved similar hydrodynamic shapes for efficient swimming. Eyes have also evolved independently numerous times. The camera-like eye exists in both vertebrates and octopuses, despite the two groups being separated by vast evolutionary distances. Convergent evolution shows that optimal solutions to environmental problems frequently exist. The same foundational challenges often yield the same answers, even in radically different lineages. It also reminds us that evolution is constrained by chemistry, physics, and the available biological materials. Different evolutionary paths can, and often do, lead to similar destinations. Vestigial structures are non-functional remnants of features that were useful to ancestors. Evolution builds by recycling what already exists. It never starts from a blank slate. Sometimes, this process leaves behind profound evidence of evolutionary history: vestigial structures, body parts that no longer perform their original function. Humans possess several. The appendix is a small, blind-ended pouch attached to the large intestine. It serves little purpose today, but likely assisted in the digestion of plant matter in our herbivorous ancestors. Wisdom teeth are another example. Our modern jaws are smaller than our ancestors, leaving insufficient space for these extra molars. The minute muscles that cause goosebumps are remnants from ancestors who could raise their fur for intimidation or warmth. The coccyx, or tailbone, is a remnant of a full tail. Even human embryos briefly develop a tail that is usually absorbed before birth. Whales and some snakes possess tiny, non-functional pelvic bones embedded deep within their bodies, remnants of the legs their land-dwelling ancestors once had. Cave-dwelling animals often have non-functional vestigial eyes. These structures defy explanation under the premise of independent, perfect design, but they make perfect sense as evolutionary history, leftovers from ancestors who actively used them. Vestigial structures are not perfectly removed because evolution cannot plan ahead. If a structure is not actively detrimental, it may persist even after its function is lost. Embryonic development reveals clear evolutionary relationships between species. The development of embryos provides some of the most compelling evidence for evolution. During early developmental stages, the embryos of vastly different animals often appear strikingly similar. For a brief period, Human embryos possess a tail, gill slits, and a temporary fine coat of hair known as lanugo. These features are echoes of our evolutionary past. The tail and the fur reflect our mammalian ancestry, while the gill slits are remnants inherited from ancient fish ancestors. As development progresses, species-specific features emerge and the embryos diverge. But the early similarities are undeniable evidence of shared ancestry. This occurs because evolution works by modifying development. Small changes early in the developmental process can lead to dramatic differences in the adult form. Natural selection acts on these developmental modifications, leading to new body plans. The study of how development evolves is called Evo-Devo. It has revealed that many of the same core genes control development across radically different animals. The genes responsible for building an insect's body are remarkably similar to those that build a mouse. Evolution is fundamentally conservative, preserving the fundamental genetic toolkit and modifying existing programs rather than constantly inventing new ones from scratch. The complexity of change evolution can produce seemingly intricate complexity through a series of incremental steps. A frequent objection raised against evolution is that complex organs, such as the eye, seem too intricate to have evolved gradually. How could a structure as complex as the eye, with its optic nerve, retina, and lens, have arisen step by step? The answer lies in the fact that every intermediate stage conferred an advantage. The simplest light-sensitive cells, patches of pigment that can distinguish between light and dark, are definitively better than having no light detection at all. A cup-shaped depression focuses light more effectively than a flat patch. A small aperture in the cup, like a pinhole camera, produces a sharper image. A transparent layer protects the aperture, and a lens focuses light even better. Each of these stages represents an improvement on the last, and each of these intermediate forms exists in living animals today. Some simple worms have only eye spots. The nautilus has a pinhole camera eye. Vertebrates possess a lens eye. Evolution is not required to build an eye all at once. It builds it incrementally, step by step, with each modification providing a survival benefit. What appears to be impossibly complex becomes entirely understandable when broken down into small cumulative changes. Irreducible complexity is a flawed argument against the process of evolution. Some critics assert that certain biological systems are irreducibly complex, meaning they require all their constituent parts to function and therefore could not have evolved gradually. The bacterial flagellum, a whip-like structure used for propulsion, is often cited. It consists of dozens of protein components, and supposedly, if you remove any one part, it fails to function. How could such a system evolve piece by piece? The scientific consensus is that the components did not all evolve simultaneously for the flagellum's current function. Many of the proteins within the flagellum are homologous to proteins used in other essential bacterial systems, such as the type Th secretion system, which bacteria use to inject toxins into host cells. Evolution operates by co-opting existing parts for new functions. A structure that initially evolved for one purpose can be modified to serve another. Intermediate stages may not resemble the final product, and some parts may change their function over time. The argument of irreducible complexity incorrectly assumes that evolution must follow a linear path toward the current final function. But evolution is highly opportunistic. It utilizes and tinkers with what is readily available, creating new structures from repurposed old parts. The bacterial flagellum and other purportedly irreducibly complex systems are comprehensively explained by the principles of evolution. Exaptation is the process where a trait that evolved for one purpose is repurposed for another. Evolution is better described as an opportunistic adjuster, not a deliberate architect. It does not design structures from first principles, but modifies existing ones. Sometimes, a trait that evolved for a specific function is later utilized for something entirely different, a process known as exaptation. Feathers are a prime example. They most likely evolved initially for simple insulation, keeping small dinosaurs warm. Subsequently, they were repurposed for display, used to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Eventually, in a specific lineage, feathers became stiff and large enough to enable powered flight. Flight was not the original function of feathers, but feathers made flight possible. Another example is the tiny bones of the inner ear. In early terrestrial vertebrates, these bones were part of the jaw structure. Over millions of years, they became smaller, migrated inward, and were co-opted to amplify sound, a new function essential for hearing. Exaptation illustrates that evolution is both creative and flexible. Structures evolve for one specific reason and end up being incredibly useful for something else entirely. This opportunistic approach is why evolution can produce such diverse and intricate forms. Evolutionary constraints limit the possible directions that evolution can take. Evolution is undeniably powerful, but its capabilities are not limitless. Constraints, limitations on what evolution can achieve, exist. One major constraint is historical. Evolution can only modify what already exists. It cannot return to the drawing board and start over. This is why all terrestrial vertebrates have a maximum of 4 limbs. The ancestral tetrapod had 4 limbs, and evolution has been working with that blueprint ever since. Whales do not develop 6 flippers. They have 2 front flippers and a tail generated from modified hind limb structures. Another constraint is developmental. Altering early developmental processes can have disastrous effects, placing limits on how much early development can change. Physical laws also constrain evolution. There is a definitive limit to the size a land animal can achieve before its skeletal structure can no longer support its weight. Insects cannot grow very large because their respiratory system, which depends on diffusion, cannot supply enough oxygen to a massive body. Evolutionary constraints explain why certain forms never evolve. There are no photosynthetic mammals, no flying elephants, and no instances of biological wheels. Evolution is inventive, but it must operate within the bounds of physics and history. Evolution has no ultimate direction or goal. It is purely adaptation to the current environment. A common error is the misconception that evolution is progressive, striving toward some ultimate goal, perfection, or endpoint. Evolution has no foresight. It is not a ladder ascending toward intelligence or complexity. It is a branching tree continuously spreading outward. Natural selection favors traits that enhance survival and reproduction in the current environment, not traits that might be useful in the distant future. Evolution cannot plan ahead. If the environment suddenly changes, a previously advantageous trait may quickly become detrimental, and vice versa. This lack of foresight explains why evolution sometimes produces structures that appear poorly designed. The human eye, for instance, has its blood vessels and nerves positioned in front of the retina, creating an inherent blind spot. A superior design, like that of the octopus eye, would have them behind the retina. But evolution worked with the available structure, and the result is imperfect. Evolution is an unintentional process, driven solely by the immediate pressures of reproduction and survival. It generates beautiful, diverse, and complex life, not because it aims to, but because those are the inevitable outcomes of countless generations of adaptation. Mass extinctions have repeatedly diverted the trajectory of evolution. If we could somehow rewind the entire history of life and play it forward again, would the same species re-emerge? Almost certainly not. Evolution is profoundly contingent, meaning it depends heavily on unpredictable chance events. Mass extinctions provide the clearest examples of this contingency. When over 90% of species are suddenly annihilated, as in the Great Dying, the identity of the few survivors determines the subsequent evolutionary course. Had a different set of species survived, the resulting evolution would have been radically different. Imagine if the dinosaurs had survived the asteroid impact. Mammals might have remained small and secretive, and humans might never have had the chance to evolve. Or imagine if an entirely different group of fish had colonized land. Terrestrial vertebrates might have 6 limbs instead of 4. Mass extinctions are unpredictable, random occurrences that drastically reshape the tree of life. Evolution is not a deterministic process. History matters. The species alive today are the result of one unique path through billions of years, a path shaped equally by necessity and by chance. Evolution and humanity. Humans continue to evolve, shaped by our modern environments. The process of evolution did not cease with the appearance of Homo sapiens. We are actively evolving and will continue to do so as long as there is differential reproduction and genetic variation. Certain traits are visibly evolving in human populations today. For example, lactose tolerance, the ability to digest milk into adulthood, evolved rapidly in populations that began domesticating cattle and relying on dairy products. In these groups, natural selection favored individuals who could digest lactose, and the trait became commonplace. Conversely, in populations with no historical tradition of dairy farming, most adults remain lactose intolerant. Similarly, populations residing in extreme high-altitude regions have evolved genetic adaptations to cope with low oxygen levels. Sickle cell trait, which provides crucial protection against the devastating effects of malaria, remains common in regions where the disease is endemic. Modern technology and medicine have altered our environment, but they have not stopped evolution. They have simply changed the nature of the selection pressures. Humans continue to adapt, and our evolution is an ongoing story. Cultural evolution operates in tandem with biological evolution in humans. Humans are unique in the degree to which culture fundamentally shapes our lives. Culture, the knowledge, behaviors, and the customs transmitted between generations through teaching and imitation, evolves at a rate far exceeding biological evolution. New technologies, languages, ideas, and social customs can sweep through populations in decades, not millennia. Cultural evolution has enabled humans to adapt to entirely new environments without waiting for genetic changes. We can survive in the polar latitudes by constructing warm shelters and clothing rather than by evolving thick fur. We can safely digest a huge variety of foods through cooking and processing, rather than by evolving new digestive enzymes. Cultural evolution has become the primary force driving human adaptation. Crucially, it is not separate from biological evolution. The two are interwoven. The invention of dairy farming created the selection pressure for lactose tolerance. The use of fire and cooking may have favored the evolution of smaller jaws and teeth. Culture and biology co-evolve, each continuously shaping the other. Understanding this dynamic interaction is essential to understanding the human experience. The future evolution of the human species is uncertain but undeniably continuous. What does the future hold for human evolution? While it is impossible to predict with certainty, we can make certain observations. Natural selection remains operational, but modern technology and medicine have diminished many traditional selection pressures. Diseases that historically caused high mortality are now treatable, lessening the selection pressure for certain kinds of disease resistance. However, new selection pressures are emerging. As humans continue to populate new environments, from major cities to eventually perhaps other planets, we may adapt to these new conditions. Gene flow is now global, with extensive intermarriage and migration, which tends to homogenize populations and reduce genetic divergence. But in small, isolated groups, genetic drift can still be active. In the distant future, if humans colonize different worlds, those populations may diverge and potentially speciate, becoming distinct human species adapted to different planetary conditions. Furthermore, technology may play a significant role. If genetic engineering becomes widespread, humans may begin to guide their own evolutionary path. The future of human evolution is complex and uncertain, but one thing is clear: the process will continue. We are not the final outcome of evolution, but merely one part of an endless, ongoing process. Understanding evolution profoundly informs medicine, conservation, and agriculture. Evolution is not merely an abstract scientific concept. It has crucial, practical applications that touch our daily lives. In medicine, understanding evolution is vital for combating infectious diseases. Viruses and bacteria evolve rapidly, and treatments such as antibiotics and vaccines must constantly account for this. Predicting disease outbreaks, vaccine development, and antibiotic stewardship all rely on deep evolutionary principles. In agriculture, evolution guides the breeding of crops and livestock. Understanding how traits are inherited and how selection works allows farmers to develop varieties with better nutritional value, higher yields, and superior disease resistance. Conservation biology depends heavily on evolutionary understanding. Protecting endangered species requires assessing their genetic diversity, understanding how small populations evolve, and implementing strategies to maintain viable populations. Evolution also provides the framework for understanding how ecosystems function, as species interactions are products of co-evolution. From environmental protection to agriculture and medicine, evolution provides the essential framework for comprehending and managing the living world. All humans belong to a single species with recent origins in Africa. Despite the external differences in appearance we observe, all human beings are a single species, Homo sapiens. We can interbreed and produce fertile offspring, which is the definition of a biological species. Genetic studies show that humans are genetically much more homogeneous compared to most other species. There is, in fact, more genetic diversity within a single population of chimpanzees than among all humans worldwide. This is largely because humans are a young species, only about 300,000 years old, and we underwent a severe population reduction known as a bottleneck when our numbers were very small. The genetic evidence is conclusive. All modern humans share a very recent common ancestry that originated in Africa. The concept of distinct, pure human races has no valid biological foundation. The variation we see in physical traits like skin color, hair texture, and facial features represents minor adaptations to local environments, all of which occurred within the last 100,000 years. These superficial differences mask the profound genetic unity of humanity. We are one family, closely related, sharing a single history encoded in our DNA. Evolution explains the roots of our human nature, but does not predetermine our choices. Understanding evolution offers deep insight into aspects of human behavior and psychology. Our social instincts, our emotions, and even certain cognitive biases are products of evolution, refined by natural selection in the environments of our ancestors. For example, our innate preference for sweet and fatty foods was adaptive when calories were scarce, although it can be problematic in a world of abundance. Our tendency to fear spiders and snakes more than cars, despite cars being vastly more dangerous, reflects ancestral dangers. However, while evolution illuminates these tendencies, it does not dictate our behavior. Humans possess reason, culture, and free will. We are capable of recognizing our evolved instincts and choosing to override them. We can change our habits, confront our innate fears, and cooperate on scales far beyond what our ancestors experienced. Evolution provides us with a nature, but it does not dictate a destiny. Understanding our evolutionary origins helps us to understand ourselves, but it does not place a limit on our future potential. The wonder of evolution. Evolution intimately connects all living things in one great unified tree of life. There is an inherent deep beauty in the evolutionary narrative. Every organism on Earth, from the tiniest bacterium to the most immense whale, is related. We all share common ancestors. If you trace your own family tree back far enough, you will find connections to every other human. Go back further and you share ancestors with chimpanzees. Further still, with all mammals, then all vertebrates, then all animals, and finally, billions of years ago, with every single living thing. We are all branches on one vast shared tree of life, rooted deep in the distant past. This connection is not a metaphor. It is a profound biological reality, written in our DNA, visible in our anatomy, and chronicled in the fossil record. The unity of life stands as one of science's most magnificent discoveries. It fosters a deep sense of kinship with the natural world. We are not separate from nature. We are an integral part of it, one species among millions, all related, all products of the same ancient process. Evolution unveils the profound history of life on the planet. The story of evolution is arguably the grandest narrative ever told. It encompasses billions of years, countless species, and every corner of the earth. It is a story of profound extinction and tenacious survival, of brilliant innovation and relentless adaptation, of global catastrophe and eventual recovery. It is the story of how simple molecules became cells, how cells achieved complexity, how life transitioned from sea to land, how creatures acquired flight, and how advanced intelligence ultimately emerged. It is the story of trilobites and giant reptiles, of tropical forests and vast deserts, of warm periods and ice ages. It is the story of how a small, tree-dwelling primate ultimately evolved into a species capable of comprehending its own origins. This immense story is still being written. Scientists continuously discover new fossils, sequence new genomes, and observe evolution in real time. Each new piece of evidence adds crucial detail, refines our understanding, and deepens our appreciation for this epic process. The story of evolution is the history of life, and it continues to unfold. Small changes over vast periods of deep time create astonishing diversity. One of the most remarkable features of evolution is its capacity to generate enormous diversity from humble beginnings. The mechanism is slow, but time is limitless. Small changes, minor mutations, tiny survival advantages accumulate over successive generations. After thousands of generations, a population is distinctly different. After millions of generations, it becomes a new species. After hundreds of millions of years, a single ancestral fish has given rise to all modern tetrapods, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, including humanity. The same fundamental process that produces a new variety of flower can, given sufficient time, generate an entirely new kingdom of life. Evolution is not a special power or a mysterious force. It is simply the inevitable result of selection, inheritance, and variation operating across the immense canvas of deep time. But the results are nothing short of extraordinary. The diversity of life on Earth, millions of species in countless forms, all emerged from common ancestors through this simple yet incredibly powerful process. Evolution is one of the most thoroughly substantiated theories in all of science. While questions or debates may exist in public discourse, among the scientific community, there is zero controversy. Evolution is among the most well-documented and robustly supported theories in all of science, standing alongside the germ theory of disease and the theory of gravity. The evidence supporting it pours in from multiple independent fields of study: paleontology, molecular biology, anatomy, embryology, genetics, and biogeography. All of these fields converge upon the exact same conclusion. Life has evolved over billions of years from common ancestors. Thousands of researchers in hundreds of countries have investigated evolution for over 150 years, and the evidence has only become stronger and more voluminous. New technologies, particularly DNA sequencing, have provided overwhelming molecular confirmation. Evolution is not a guess or a simple hypothesis. It is a mature, robust scientific theory, meaning a thoroughly substantiated explanation supported by a vast body of evidence. It has been repeatedly tested and has never been definitively refuted. Understanding evolution is absolutely essential to understanding the biological world. As one celebrated geneticist once wrote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." Understanding evolution enhances our appreciation for the living world. Learning about the process of evolution permanently changes how you perceive the world around you. A robin is not merely a bird, but a living dinosaur, a direct descendant of the creatures that walked alongside Tyrannosaurus rex. A large oak tree is not merely wood and leaves, but the product of 500 million years of botanical adaptation, meticulously refined by countless generations to capture sunlight and withstand harsh weather. Your own hand, with its 5 distinct fingers, is built upon the identical bone pattern found in a bat's wing and a whale's flipper, a design blueprint inherited from a fish that first crawled onto land 375 million years ago. Evolution unveils the profound hidden connections, the deep ancestry, and the shared history behind every living entity. It reveals a world that is not static, but dynamic, perpetually changing, adapting, and diversifying. It shows us a world far more intricate, ancient, and wondrous than it appears at first glance. Understanding evolution is not about memorizing facts. It is about learning to see the world with new eyes, recognizing the epic story etched into every creature, and appreciating the remarkable journey that has culminated in the rich tapestry of life we cherish today. And so, dear listener, our long journey through the history of evolution draws to a quiet conclusion. From the first spark of life in the primordial oceans to the emergence of modern humanity, we have traced a path that spans billions of years. We have seen how small, incremental changes accumulate into profound transformations, how species diversify and adapt, and how both survival and catastrophic extinction shape the vast tree of life. We have explored the fundamental mechanisms that propel evolution, the irrefutable evidence that supports it, and the deep wonder it inspires. The story of evolution is not separate from your own personal story. It is your story. It is the history of where we came from and how we came to exist. Every cell in your body, every breath you take, every complex thought you have is a part of this ancient, ongoing legacy. You are a living connection in an unbroken chain that stretches back through time, linked to every organism that has ever lived. As you now rest here, allowing your breath to become slow and deep, imagine yourself as part of this grand continuity. Picture the first cells suspended in the early seas, the first brave creatures hauling themselves onto the land, the first flowers bursting into bloom, the first birds taking to the air. See your distant ancestors, barely human, standing beneath the same ancient stars, all of it flowing forward, generation after generation, leading inexorably to this very moment, to you, here, now. The story is not yet finished. Evolution continues in bacteria adapting to new antibiotics, in finches changing their beaks in response to climate shifts, and in humans spreading across the globe and beyond. Find rest in that profound knowledge, in the deep time that preceded you and the vast future that stretches ahead. Let the slow, steady rhythm of evolution carry you into stillness, into peace, into sleep. If you feel your eyelids growing heavy, allow the grand story of life on Earth to wrap around you, gently, and guide you into calm. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and slowly drift into sleep, into silence, into the boundless, timeless current where all life intertwines. Wishing you a quiet, comforting night.